Look at your heart. Let's play Big Bang, take Lil Bang, the sharpest knife in the drawer. You looking like a Lil Shank. I used to want that no limit chain with a little tank. Now my team disturbing the peace. All it took was a little fate. Invite my girl over, dim the lights, play a little tank, just to set the mood right. Compliment with the moonlight. You feeling envious? Then miss me, my guy. Cause I've been angry all my life. Time to let bliss be my guide. Black power. Put your fist to the sky. That's word to Rosa Parks, I'm finna ride. But any one of my Ruby D's or ML Kings that's full of pride. Of my young niggas in them slums trying to survive. They've been deprived and it ain't right. But see, it's life. You look inside, you might see Christ. You might find enough bass to blow the sound out your stereotype, nigga. We been cheated, we just need our restitution. And a little.
What was your experience growing up as an African American?
So ultimately, man, I think for me, the best word to describe it is love. I had a very loving situation. Now, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and Newark is no walk in the park. To call it a hard spot is an understatement. But I had great family, and we had great community, and people beyond just my mother and father made sure that we felt valued and that we felt loved. And in a place where sometimes there wasn't money, and there was some times where you had sleep for dinner, and sometimes you actually opened up the oven to heat the house. You know what I mean? And nobody make a peanut butter and jelly better than my brother. Right. But even with all of that, they knew that we had to feel loved and valued, because that's what would drive us further. From where we grew up, where we started.
Wow. So love and values. How do you think that helped you become the man you are today?
Those are love of confidence. So the love and the values helped me to be confident in who I am, and that it's all right to be who I am. A chubby kid on the block of a whole bunch of runners and jumpers. It made me feel valuable as a young man who was more inclined to academics, who was pretty smart in school and did fairly well. It made me comfortable with doing those things and being that way. It also made me aware of situations that didn't feel like the standard that had been laid in my house. And the standard being love and value, I was very intuitive in a sense around things that didn't reflect what I'd grown up with. And so I'm able to navigate situations that don't feel like they're gonna have an outcome of love and value, while I can navigate through situations where I understand people are not going to share love and value in their interactions with me. And so I knew how to hunker down and weather that storm, because I knew I was worth what I was gonna come out of in the end. So those are things that help propel myself through some pretty tough situations. You know what I mean? So, urban settings being what they are, 70s and 80s, when crack was what it was and crack was king, how to navigate those experiences, how to make decisions from something as simple as where to walk and where to go to the store, to who you hang with after school, to what things your mother would kill you for, to what things your father would be disappointed in you about. It was, we didn't always end up in the belt, but sometimes the love and the value had me worried about disappointing the people who showered me with love and values. You know what I mean? So I made decisions, and my response to my friends would be, man, I'm gonna kill my mother. Man, I'll break my father's heart. And I didn't have a problem saying it, because once I felt that abundance of love in my house, I didn't want to negotiate that for anything. So the love and value became the non-negotiable. So to take a step back, the love and the value in the urban setting, I think that was instilled in us because my parents, growing up in Newark, which was the last city in the Union to be taken from under martial law after King was killed, my father went to school with Sherman tanks driving up and down the street when he grew up. So, he saw, the government's response or the nation's response to, the angst and the issues that Black Americans were experiencing at the time. So to give us that kind of value system, he knew that we're living in a world that didn't place a whole lot of value on us. We live in a world that looked at us in very limited views with very specific uses to it. And once we started brushing up against those expectations and challenging those expectations, he knew we'd be in a world that would push back, nudgingly, push back forcefully, and push back legislatively. So he had to give us a wealth of value and sense of self. And my mom had to give us a value and sense of self because the world we live in said dead in jail or in prison by the time you're 21. Seeing the drug trade in the community, seeing the single family home that we lived in, not seeming to be respected in the community as much as what happened down South Orange Avenue. It gave us a perspective of what's so different about us. And without an explanation, because of course the world as it exists doesn't explain to you why people clutch their purse when they walk by you. They'll explain to you why the teacher tells a 3-year-old in kindergarten class that he's so disrespectful. It doesn't explain those things. What it does is says just act against you. And so as a child, like a lot of children today, being highly socially intuitive, I can see that something's not fair. I don't really know why it's not fair or what's happening to make it unfair, but I can just see that things were unfair. I think that's what we experience in America today is that, there's still a real level of unfair treatment going on. And a lot of our young people might not have the beautiful, eloquent way of saying this isn't fair, but they recognize that things aren't fair and they respond to it when they're throwing stones in Baltimore. They respond to it when they're marching in Ferguson. They're responding to it in all these different ways. Is it the best way to respond? That's not for me to argue. But that's all a response to what we know and experience to these days. That wow, you can still very legitimately, devalue black life. And I think young people are saying we're pretty much tired of that approach. We're tired of being devalued so openly on video phones and everything. We're not going to accept that any longer. And growing up helped me to understand those emotions, how to utilize them, where to place them, because sometimes the energy is placed in the wrong way and it doesn't get the outcome we want. But the way I grew up and the experiences I've had in America, I definitely see where there is a slight or a slant. The ground's just not even. And there's a ton of things we can go into as to why, but let's acknowledge that there is privilege and there's deficit and there's inequity and work from that spot. The biggest thing is organize. I learned in a class, a man I call Obi-Wan Kenobi once told me, organize or agonize. And so we can sit around and be mad and go to the barbershop and be mad and sit on the porch and crack a brew and be mad and, oh man, the manager. Or we can organize. We can make sure people understand that we recognize inequity and we have a strategic approach to addressing inequity. If we don't get strategic, and strategic to me means the mechanisms that exist today for us to utilize to our fullest, make sure they recognize that we're no longer going to play the game the way it's played now. We're going to organize ourselves to get equity, or we're going to change the rules completely through our action, not our inaction and not our negative action, but just through action, we're going to change the game for you. So organizing is the biggest thing. And people often miss that organize. They often think of it in the old ways of the 60s where it's like, you're king and we're all behind you. We're not looking for one solitary leader. We've seen what happens when that goes down, right? Instead, what we want to have is a situation where we have hundreds, thousands of leaders on the same mindset towards the things we want to do. And we've seen it happen a ton of times, right? We've seen people all go towards one thing when it's placed up as a beacon of light. And a lot of times there are terrible analogies to it. I got a meme that was sent to me once. And they showed me, it showed a line, saying, this is the line at midnight for the opening of the newest Jordan shoe. They showed me another meme, here's a line for the opening of the new Apple iPhone. They showed me the line at the PTA meeting, right? So we see what kind of beacons we can hold up and everybody runs to it, universally, right? And then we see what other things we just haven't made, or identified, or urged, or had conversation about the importance of. And so we get what we get, and we're often treated as consumers and pieces for consumption because we aren't organized to be producers and activators. And I learned all of that because of, Newark in the 70s and 80s was very much kind of nationalist tinge to it. It was very much a movement happening in that city. And so as a result of the experience I've gotten at home and in my community, organizing was a very big deal to us. My father said, unless you can dunk or you're on stage with your four brothers, education is the only way you can gain some level of liberation. Only way you can really earn today. He says that because he wants to make sure people recognize that we are not going to, dunk that ball, and we are not going to be on stage with our four brothers. And what the masses can do is get informed. So, what happens today, education is even a tough place to find equity as well, because we find in education today that the educators aren't necessarily pro-you. They aren't necessarily pro-little Billy who's in second grade, and because he's active and rambunctious, we want to label him special needs. You know what I mean? When really what it is it's our inability to digest and interact with this small bundle of joy at 8 years old, who has a ton of energy, inquisitive about life, and also recognizes some difference between he and the instructor he has. So even education has gotten hard for us to capitalize on. It's not impossible. That's still the best way to go. But education is necessary because once you get information, you have an obligation, right? So once you're informed, you know what the situation is, which is why I work the way I work now. Once I was informed and knew what the situation was, then very simply, liberation for my people became my mantra. So when in the past I was asked, what do you do? Obviously I'm a liberator. I never told them where I worked. I said, I'm a liberator. Oh, really? Well, what do you mean by that? Well, my job is to make sure black and brown people, have the experiences and the opportunity that they're deserving of, so that they can achieve the prosperity in the country that everyone else wants to achieve. All we want is the same playing ground. And I'm working to liberate my people, so I push education all the time. Because, once I inform a group of young people and they have the information and the knowledge on how to move, their own fire gets stoked. And then that's how you create these hundreds and thousands of generals that we talked about. My father, again, told me, as an educator, because I worked in education for a long time, he said, as an educator, you're not going to change the world, but you're going to change the mind that changes the world. And so that became the battery in my back to keep doing what I do, because, we might not see the change during my time, but I got 4 kids, and, Lord willing, they're going to have kids. And, I will have not done my job if somebody's not fighting for my grandchildren to have the opportunities that I'm still fighting for now, that my father fought for then, that, tanks rolled down the block was another bunch of guys fought for back then. There's work that has to be done, and education brings about the information that builds the obligation to action, to organize.
So what makes you proud to be or to say that I'm an African American?
This comes off weird, but we're not broken. Like, our struggle is unlike anyone else's in the world. And this isn't one of those your blues ain't like mine moments, but for what the black man in America is, and the trip, that the experience, diaspora, if you will. I can't, and I'm not a scholar, so maybe someone else can, but I can't identify another population of people whose experience in America, whose actual arrival in America is similar to ours. I can't name one. Again, I'm not a historian, but our arrival, our existence, our struggle is unlike anyone else's in this country. Yet we're not broken. You know what I mean? And so to me, that speaks to the power of the spirit of the African American. So if American culture dominates the world, which I think in a lot of places, American culture is something that's seeped into the world's culture, and people chomp at the bit around it. What dominates American culture? We touch the spirit of this country. We got a finger on the soul of this country. And so if everyone wants to do what Americans do, and most Americans want to do what we do, we got to recognize our power and grab onto that. Like, at the end of the day, funny tangent, there's a movie called Be Cool. At the end of that movie, Cedric the Entertainer gives a minute and a half soliloquy. Guy calls me N-word. He says, "Be cool, N-word." And so Cedric kind of gets upset. And he talks about, African American contributions across the history of this continent, all the way down to the swagger that you see black folk have, the natural rhythm of our move, which identifies as the embodiment of cool. And he talks about how you wanted to be us from the day you met us. Everything about us, you want to be on top of our contributions to gross national product, right? So at the end of the day, I am cool. Don't ever ask me to be cool. Don't tell me to be cool. My existence is cool. We ain't broken. That's the beauty of being black in America. No matter what they've done, and the history is ridiculous. And we talk about instances of terrorism that happened in America. We say never forget. Never forget. Our experiences are undeniable. They're documented. People want to say, "Oh, well, there's a black president." And like at the end of the day, the history is real. But look at the achievements in spite of that. There's still a long way to go. We shouldn't rest on our laurels, and no one person, a biscuit above a chicken dinner, need to identify and recognize that they've made it, right? Because we haven't made it. We just aren't broken yet. We've been against the ropes a lot, but we ain't broken, and that's the beauty of us. That's the thing that makes me proud to be a black man. And we often throw around, different terminology, African American, but I often use the term black man because it does give me a sense of fuel. Like I have no qualms with being a black man. I'm grateful to be born this way. I feel value in it, and if there's something I thank the Creator for often, this is one of them. Absolutely one of them.
Wow.
So it's this is the beautiful thing about the easy thing about this, even this conversation, brother, is that with me having 4 children and knowing what my father wanted to put into us, and he's always said, my job is to make you better than me. And whatever better means, right? More education, more money, whatever better is, better father, better husband, whatever better is. And now I say that to my children. Daddy's job is to make sure you're better than me. Because if we all are invested in our children becoming better than us, we're pushing it all forward. The rising tide lifts, and our boats get patched. Right now, the rising tide lifting our boats, that doesn't work because a lot of us got holes in our boats. If we push our children to become better, we're patching those holes. The things Daddy didn't do so well growing up, my son is great at it. You know what I mean? So the areas that I knew, man, I was always a little timid with this, or wasn't too strong at that. My daughters are killing it in those places. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Patch up all my holes, and now you don't have those issues. Because Daddy wants to make sure, that you are better than him. And one of the things that we instill in him is that you are the most beautiful black being the Creator's ever given. You know what I mean? Like when the Creator created you, lights out. He didn't want to do any more work. Like he cooked you to the perfect degree, and look at you now. And I do that with the 4 of my own. I did it with the 1,100 that I ran in my school. I do it in this role now. It's just making sure people understand that while you have this blessing, there is an obligation. Right? You have the blessing because people still, we shoot them up here. Everybody wants to be, this embodiment of cool. But and that's a lot of conversation around appropriation of culture nowadays, which is going on a lot. But with that, there's an obligation that comes. The appropriators aren't going to have the obligation. They don't feel that obligation. They'll never come to the aid of the situation. Oscar's so white, right? Like all the liberals in Hollywood are saying that's a problem. Like you don't hear any of them saying, "Oh my God, we got to do something." So we have an obligation to push, just like everyone else pushes their agenda. We have to push our agenda. And that organizing comes in political fashion, in arts and entertainment fashion, in the sports realm. We have to push our obligation. I was talking to my brother one day, and I said to him, "How awesome would it be if our athletes, right, they sign a contract, and say, hey, you know what? I'll take $1.5 million less, $2 million, whatever. I don't do those numbers well. I'll take $1 million less, but I want a quarter on every beer that gets sold in the arena when I play. I want you to donate that to the neighborhoods around this facility. So if I play for the Nationals, right, You pay me 25. I'll take 23. Take 23 million. But I want a nickel on every beer sold in here. And I want the South Side to get that nickel. Every nickel. I mean, and the reverberation will be tremendous. What are they gonna tell you? No, Cespedes, you can't get that. No, Brian, you can't. John Wall, you're talking crazy. You can't give a nickel on a penny on every beer to whomever. And it's a ridiculous claim only because we haven't recognized our power to make those statements. When Jada started talking about the Oscars and she made those statements about boycott, like, there is never, people look like, oh my God, she's bugging out, not making movies, what are you saying? Again, if we know we touch the spirit, we have our fingers on the soul of this country. What happens if we say, you can no longer use my gift for your enjoyment? Until Motown was the sound of the movement. When the movement was rocking, and King and Medgar and Martin and all these people out there moving, they went into Motown, they made records, what's going on? They made records like, yo, this has to change. So, you've always loved our culture. When you turn me on in your drive home, after a long day when you heard Water Cooler talk about what Martin's out there doing, you turn the radio, now I'm in your ear, what's going on? Now I'm in your Donny Hathaway singing Someday We'll All Be Free. Like, you're taking me home now. I'm seeping into your very being. And you gotta make some adjustments. Because we're gonna sing this song in your ear for the next 30 years you get it right. We've fallen for some tricks when now we don't do that any longer, but in every avenue of what we do. As an educator, I make sure that my teachers have cultural competency education. You have to recognize who you're working with, what they are like, who they are, and how you need to understand the social mores of this culture. You're walking into a brand new situation. So if you come in here with your suburban witty sarcasm, my 3-year-old, my second grader might take it as a sign of disrespect. My high schooler might want to fly that head. So let me teach you how to better engage them, because there's nothing wrong with them, but we've engaged them wrong. So everywhere we go, we have to use our power to push people to the brink of their comfort levels when it comes to this equity piece. You know what I mean? And that's what my work is to do now, is to make sure people are pushed to the edges of their comfort zone, because equity is real and it has to happen. And we can't wait for another president, and we can't wait for another legislative hearing. We have to make people understand, you come to Starbucks and get this coffee, hey, how you doing, man? I was crazy what so-and-so said in the media yesterday, right? Hey, have a good day. Hey, everywhere you go, if we know we touch the spirit of this country, let's start using that power in everywhere we can. Stop being bought. That's my own angle. That's the views that of this individual do not reflect blah 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 blah. What's the biggest sneaker ever? You know what I mean? Like, it's not the Stan Smith. You know what I mean? It's not the Ryle Laver. Kurt Rambis ain't got no shoe. You know what I mean? Who's the biggest musician ever? Yeah, Mike beat Elvis's records. You know what I mean? So, every arts education, and those are just the generic few that we touch upon all the time, right? Sports and and the arts. But we know that's the part that moves the spirit, right? The heights of human effort. That's what sports represent. We go to the hilt of human effort where you push your body to the limit, and then something emotional and spiritual takes place to push your body further than the human condition can go. That's why we love sports as a country. Well, who do we see pushing that limit to the greatest degree? Who do we revere and revel in these moments? They're often us. The arts, it's very simple. The arts to me is an expression of our connectedness to the Almighty, our connectedness to a power greater than ourselves. The arts represent the ability to speak in languages that speak to your emotions and your spirits. Do we not slay that, right? So, and even now with us having a president who's African American, one of the things that tells me is that the excellence is recognized and we know it's there. From all the accomplishments in the legislative and the judiciary system with African American Supreme Court judges now, and things to that degree, like there's a recognition of our ability, our skill set, and our talent. Then why isn't there equity? because there's a belief, in my opinion, that equity means you want to take my seat at the table. And so I'm fighting for my seat. Because in some people's mind, equity means I now have to have less so you can have more, which puts me, back in this race. The equity I'm talking about only means if we use everybody's skills and values, we value everyone the same, we're building a bigger table. I don't want your chair. I think your chair is marred in all the ugly sins of our fathers. I don't want your chair. But let me belly up to the table that we've now constructed a new table with, and now there's enough room for me. And now I'm adding on to the experience, which only blows up our collective value. Our collective value increases when my contributions are used. A gentleman told me in regards to technology in the African American sector, they said, we probably have a point, I don't want to get this wrong, but something to the degree of a percentage, a portion of a percent, a fraction of 1% of the technology in the U.S., technology firms in the U.S. are African American. And then he goes on to say, could you imagine if we spent $20 million in the African American community with venture capitalists? He said, we'll have $1 billion idea within the next 3 years. $1 billion idea. He said, because it's an untapped market. And the genius that exists in the black community has yet to be tapped by the tech firms in the world. So imagine what that could become. If you belly up, if you build this bigger table, bring that black genius, as he called it, into the room in technology, there will be another Facebook, Uber, Snapchat, whatever the big deal is. There'll be another boom like that because the black ingenuity has yet to be tapped. So building a bigger table, I don't want Facebook's seat. I just want to put another guy at the table who builds something that probably will complement that. And you'll both get money. So we have the capacity, as we see in all realms. We haven't been bold and brazen enough. Ralph Ellison said it all. The white man's relish is the black man's gall, right? So what they relish in, like the ability to forge out and create anew and all that, the whole frontiersman idea. It's how dare you try to do that? Who do you think you are? You jump out here and start your own startup and expect somebody to give you $2.5 million? Yeah, I do, because I am black genius. And that's redundant to say that. Black genius is a redundant term. I am genius, or I am black is just enough, right? So of course I expect it. Why wouldn't I? That's the American way. You tell me I shouldn't experience the American way? To jump out this, I'm gonna start my own. I'm incapable of a small business. Why? When I got the MBA that you have or that you don't have, when I have all the affiliation, I don't have the access to wealth, which is why we aren't experiencing the level of genius that we should in the black community, the access to wealth, but the genius is absolutely there. If we begin to demand, and we can do it in soft ways, we can do it in legislative ways by pushing for candidates who support us, by pushing for legislation that supports us. We can do it in soft ways by making sure in casual conversations, the people that you have a level of influence over, you begin to speak these things to life about the need for, challenging the process is what got us this far. I don't know why we seem afraid to challenge that process continuously. And John Henry Clark, man, marching don't do nothing but wear out our shoes now. We have to get busy. We have to sit in hearings and say, my name is, I live in, I'm a registered voter, and I will remember your decision on this topic when it's time for me to vote. As a matter of fact, I'll make sure 30 people in my neighborhood remember your decision on this topic when it's time for us to vote for you next. Like, challenging the process brought us to this point in America. We will continue to get more and get chances at that table and get more opportunities the more we challenge the process. When we allow, brothers and sisters to get shot dead in the street and we don't challenge that process in a productive way, then we don't get action. But then when we do things like say, hey, we're gonna vote out, the members who approve this action, don't let it be a 3-week anchor, let it be a 3-year anchor when the next ballot comes up. Then remember who sat where when that ballot came up. When homeboy was shot, let's remember who sat where. Let's get all them jokers out. I'm gonna get all these other people who seem to speak to what we're about, we're gonna put them in. Collective action. That's how we move our needle even further. You know, we've gotten some gains. We have not yet made it. A lot of us believe we have. You know what I mean? But to me, you know, until the least of us are in a better situation, we haven't attained anything. And we have to, because you know, our spirit is that of a communal people. So we have to make sure the least of us has. You know what I mean? You're only strongest is you're only strong as your weakest link in your chain, right? So we have to make sure the least of us has the opportunity, has the ability, has the education. Once that happens, then it's an even race. You can start the gun and we can see what's what. But right now, you know, we got to be more organized to fight for things we know that we give to this country and that they take for granted. Quite frankly, have taken for granted historically. You know, naming bars after great black folk ain't enough. I'm sorry. You know, you can't just give me a cool bar and say, hey, I named that in honor of so-and-so because you people need that. No, miss me with that. Let me own the building. You can lease it from me and then name it after that guy. Then that's equity to me. If I own this building, yeah, name it what you want. But, you know, that's appropriation. That's an occupation, if you will. This is an occupied reality for African Americans in some sense. And now I've said too much.
No, I just got one more question for you. And it's not even on here, but immediately, if you're describing the African American experience, community, or the person, what are 3 terms that immediately come to mind?
If I'm describing the African American community,
Just the culture.
the culture,
American culture.
rich, marvelous, godly. You know what I mean? Like that's, if I identify the culture, that's a word that comes to mind. Like, I think that, you know, people of African descent are connected. Like we are spiritual people. We're connected to the Creator. Like undoubtedly, like our steps and motions, being so alien to what goes on in the world, you know, I think we are definitely connected to the Creator in ways that are unspoken and unknown in some realms. You know what I mean? But like, I mean, I can see it in us in everything we do. I can see it in us. You know what I mean? You know, it's cliche to say black is beautiful, but damn, it's one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. You know, I wouldn't trade it for nothing. I say God is what I see when I see black people. You know what I mean? I see the manifestation of the power, the love of the Creator. You know, and nothing short of that.
Bit more solution and less pollution. Real talk.
Picture me cruising through my city streets, running every red light, cause all a nigga see is green.
Picture me.
Picture me as a California vet, just trying to fulfill my purpose while I'm thumbing through a check. Picture me drinking, smoking, ashing out roaches, straight West Coastin'.
Picture me.
Picture me inviting your girl to come with me to the top to shed my light on the